United States and Iran, with the Strait of Hormuz shut. Similarly, how can any ceasefire between India and Pakistan hold without the Indus Water Treaty being restored? From Hormuz, we must turn to the Indus because what is true of the Strait of Hormuz is true with even greater intimacy and greater cruelty of the Indus Basin. A strait may carry the oil of nations. The Indus carries the life of nations. India had announced its intention to abandon the Indus Waters Treaty as part of their unjustified assault on Pakistan last summer. It is a war that is internationally recognized as one that India lost. Even India's greatest allies can't help but marvel at the number of planes downed by Pakistan. Pakistan emerging victorious from this David versus Goliath scale conflict has reshaped the geopolitics of the region. The concept of propping up India as a net security provider in the region has been abandoned and the world has moved on. However, I must caution, while Pakistan has stuck to the ceasefire, which were to be discussed, whereas Pakistan has stuck to the terms of the ceasefire, India has not. There were clear and explicit terms of the ceasefire which were to be discussed at a meeting in a neutral location where all friction points were to be addressed. We were to return to the status ante in the meantime, which would of course include India returning to its obligations under the Indus Waters Treaty prior to this dispute. It has not. Therefore, a year on, it is a legitimate question for Pakistan to answer. Do we still abide by a ceasefire that leaves far too many questions unanswered? Just as one could not imagine warring parties agreeing to a ceasefire, let alone peace, without a free-flowing Strait of Hormuz, how can Pakistan be expected to sustain a ceasefire when India continues to pose an existential threat? Let there be no ambiguity in Islamabad, in New Delhi, in Washington, in Beijing, in London, at the United Nations. This is not a technical dispute. This is not a clerical quarrel between commissioners. This is not a matter of paperwork, hydrology, or administrative abeyance. This is the weaponization of water. The Indus Water Treaty was not a favor given to Pakistan. It was a solemn international settlement. It was brokered in the shadow of partition because the rivers of Punjab and Sindh could not be left to the mercy of anger. The World Bank states plainly that the treaty allocates the western rivers, the Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, to Pakistan, and the eastern rivers to India, while allowing each side limited uses on rivers allocated to the other. So when India says it will place this treaty in abeyance, India is not merely suspending meetings. It is striking at an international compact that has survived wars, crises, mobilizations, and generations of hostility. And what is the Indus to Pakistan? It is not a river on a map. It is our bread, it is our cotton, it is our wheat, it is our fields of Sindh, our orchards of Punjab, our waters of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, our channels of Balochistan. It is our farmer at dawn. It is our mothers drawing water, our children eating roti, our worker in the mill, our prayer before the harvest. To cut the Indus is not to pressure a government, it is to threaten a people. Pakistan has over 200 million souls. No state, no prime minister, no army, no court, no parliament. We step towards the strangulation of its waters as a national security assault, not merely a diplomatic irritant, not as a footnote in a foreign ministry brief, not as another file to be moved from one desk to another. It must be treated as an attack on the foundations of the state. That does not mean that Pakistan seeks war. We do not seek war. We have buried too many sons. We have seen too much blood in this region. We know the price of adventurism. We know the tragedy of miscalculation. But peace is not surrender. Restraint is not paralysis. Diplomacy is not silence. And patience is not permission. If India wants the world to take its threats seriously, Pakistan must compel the world to take our survival seriously. Our message must be clear. Any move to block, divert, manipulate, or potentially politically control Pakistan's rightful waters will not be treated as routine engineering. Every survey, every tender, every canal proposal, every dam design, every concrete step towards changing the flow guaranteed to Pakistan must be treated as a strategic warning signal. It must trigger a whole of the state response, legal, diplomatic, economical, political, informational, national security preparedness, and even military response. Pakistan should not allow India to climb the ladder of coercion while we remain trapped at the bottom, issuing statements of concern that says the final strangulation of water is an existential threat, cannot remain silent when the strangulation is prepared, financed, designed, tendered, and normalized. A nation does not wake up only when the riverbed is dry. A nation wakes up when the first stone is moved to dam our future. It is only rational to ask, what are we doing in terms of military preparedness as India continues to pursue her stated path? But let me also say this. Pakistan must not make a single move that concedes India's illegal position. We must not behave as though India's decision is fait accompli. We must not build policy on the assumption that the treaty is dead. We must not rush to create downstream substitute dams in a way that tells the world India has succeeded, now Pakistan is adjusting. Or give the impression that we were victorious on the battlefield but have surrendered on the banks of the river. No. Pakistan's position must remain immovable. The treaty lives, India's obligations are live, Pakistan's rights live. The Indus does not become India's instrument because India has discovered the language of abeyance. Projects and dams already approved before India's unilateral decision should continue on their own merit. Pakistan must complete what Pakistan has already planned. We must strengthen our dams, reservoirs, barrages, canals, and flood management systems because Pakistan needs water security regardless of India's aggression. But let us be precise. There is a difference between strengthening Pakistan and accepting India's blackmail. There is a difference between national resilience and diplomatic surrender. There is a difference between preparing for scarcity and legitimizing theft. We must move on a war footing for water conservation, of course. We must modernize irrigation. We must reduce waste in canals. We must invest in drip irrigation, smart agriculture, lining where needed, telemetering, groundwater regulation, recycling, and urban water discipline. We must make every drop count, not because India has a right to steal our water, but because Pakistan has a duty to respect its own future. We must explore every source outside the scope of the treaty. Desalination of our coasts, water recycling for our cities, climate-resilient water storage, regional water cooperation, and even the long-term feasibility of bringing water from Central Asia through negotiated corridors and sovereign agreements. Let engineers dream, let planners calculate, let diplomats negotiate, and let the state act with imagination. But do not confuse resilience with retreat. The Indus Water Treaty must be defended in every forum. The World Bank, the United Nations, international courts, and arbitrary bodies. Friendly capitals, Muslim capitals, Western capitals, African capitals, and Asian capitals. Pakistan must internationalize the principle, not merely the grievance. Because the world now needs new law. International law has rules for sea, Straits used for international navigation are governed by transit passage principles, and ships and aircrafts enjoy a right of transit passage that shall not be impeded. International water law also rests on the equitable and reasonable utilization, prevention of significant harm, and prior notification of measures that may adversely affect other states' sharing of water courses. International humanitarian law recognizes that water installation and irrigation systems are indispensable for civilian survival. And the ICRC has warned that the deprivation of water as a method of warfare is strictly prohibited. Yet the age we are entering demands more. We need a new international convention against the weaponization of waterways. It must apply to maritime choke points like Hormuz, to transboundary rivers like the Indus. It must prohibit the use of civilian water dependency as a coercive instrument. It must create emergency injunctions against unilateral treaty suspensions. It must impose automatic international scrutiny on projects that threaten downstream survival. It must recognize that in a climate-stressed century, water coercion is not merely unfriendly conduct. It is aggression by other means. The 20th century feared the bomb, so the 21st century must also fear the faucet controlled by a hostile hand. And to our Indian neighbors, I say this: you cannot build greatness on the thirst of another people. You cannot call yourself a civilization while threatening another civilization's river. You cannot speak of democracy while placing millions under hydrological siege. You cannot invoke development while turning water into a weapon. The Indus is older than both our flags. It has seen empires come and go. It has seen kings, colonizers, conquerors, generals, viceroys, prime ministers, and presidents. They all passed. The river remained, and Pakistan will remain. We must understand the nature of the conflict before us. It is not confined to one front. It is not only a matter of borders. Pakistan is being targeted through proxies, through propaganda, through economic pressures, through attempts at diplomatic isolation, through hybrid warfare, through the politics of fear, and now through the politics of water. This is war by other means. When a state seeks to isolate you, destabilize you, blame you, bleed you, then threaten the river that sustains your people, you are already in a war of national survival. Whether the guns are firing every day or not, the only test is not the only test of war. The test is whether the life of the nation is being targeted. And today, the life of the nation is being targeted. So let us rise above party, above province, above faction, above the petty quarrels that have so often weakened us. The Indus does not belong to one government. It does not belong to one party. It does not belong to one province. It belongs to Pakistan. It belongs to history. Let there be unity in Parliament. Let there be clarity at GHQ. Let there be resolve in the Foreign Office. Let there be urgency across government. Let there be science in our university. Let there be sacrifice in our politics. And let there be discipline in our people. We do not ask for charity. We demand law. We do not ask for sympathy. We demand justice. We do not ask for permission to live. We assert our right to life. Pakistan must say to the world, the Indus cannot be held hostage. The treaty cannot be suspended by arrogance. The river cannot be turned into a weapon. The thirst of children cannot become the policy of a neighboring state. And Pakistan must say to India, do not mistake our divisions for weakness. Do not mistake our restraint for fear. Do not mistake our appeal to law for lack of resolve. We have survived partition. We have survived war. We have survived terror. We have survived floods. We have survived dictatorships, sanctions, conspiracies, and betrayals, and we are still here. The Indus made us patient. The Indus made us fertile, and the Indus made us stubborn. And if anyone believes that Pakistan will surrender the Sindhu, they do not know Pakistan. They do not know Sindh. They do not know Punjab. They do not know Balochistan. They do not know Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. They do not know Kashmir or Gilgit-Baltistan. They do not know the people who have lived by these rivers for thousands and thousands of years. We want peace, but peace with dignity. We want dialogue, but dialogue under law. We want coexistence, but not submission. So from this seminar, from this city, from this moment, let a message go forth. Pakistan will defend its water, its people, its treaty, its sovereignty, and its future. The world should not pretend that the strangulation of the Indus is a technical dispute. It is in public literature on Pakistan's deterrence posture. Economic strangulation has long been treated as one of the gravest thresholds, and stopping the Indus has been understood as falling within this category. Therefore, when India weaponizes water, it is not merely violating a treaty, it is pushing South Asia towards the edge of strategic catastrophe. If we see an attack on our rivers as a military assault, we must respond militarily as well. Pakistan should escalate militarily at the tendering stage, mobilize at the construction stage, and proceed to conventional conflict. And if all else fails, our waters are truly cut off. The Indus is not negotiable. The Sindhu is not for surrender. Let the world understand the danger of what India has done. No power, however large, however arrogant, however intoxicated, could impose an existential defeat upon Pakistan. And what is more existential than water? A nation may survive sanctions. A nation may survive isolation. A nation may survive diplomatic pressures. But no nation can survive the deliberate strangulation of its rivers that feeds its fields, its children, and its future. This is why the Indus cannot be treated as an ordinary dispute. This is why the suspension of the Indus water treaties cannot be treated as diplomatic theater. This is why every capital in the world must understand the weaponization of the Indus is not a bureaucratic act, it is a strategic act. Pakistan has never hidden from the world that economic strangulation is among the greatest threats to its survival. Therefore, India must not be allowed to believe that it can climb step by step towards water strangulation while the world yawns, while institutions debate vocabulary, while diplomats search for softer phrases, and while Pakistan is expected to remain quiet until the riverbed is dry. No. A nation does not defend its life only at the final moment. A nation defends its life at the first warning. Every move towards coercive control of Pakistan's waters must be understood as an escalation in a national security crisis. Every declaration, every project, every administrative step, every attempt to normalize unilateral control over flows guaranteed to Pakistan must be answered with seriousness, unity, preparedness, and the full force of sovereign resolve. We do not seek war, but we will not accept slow motion aggression. We do not seek catastrophe, but we will not allow catastrophe to be prepared in the language of engineering. We do not seek confrontation, but no one should mistake restraint for surrender. The purpose of deterrent is to prevent disaster, not to invite it. But deterrence collapses when red lines are blurred, when existential threats are minimized, when aggressors are allowed to test the patience of nations, drop by drop, brick by brick, canal by canal, and dam by dam. So Pakistan must speak clearly. The Indus is not a pressure point. The Indus is not a bargaining chip. The Indus is not a weapon to be placed in India's hands. The Indus is a lifeline of Pakistan. And any attempt to turn that lifeline into a noose must be treated as a threat to the survival of our state. This is the message that Pakistan must deliver to India. This is the message that Pakistan must deliver to the world, not in panic, not in hysteria, not in recklessness, but with the cold clarity of a people who know what is at stake. Because peace in South Asia will not be preserved by pretending water coercion is harmless. Peace will be preserved only when India understands that the rivers of Pakistan cannot be touched without shaking the foundations of regional stability. The world has learned to fear the missiles. It must now learn the fear of the weaponization of water. The 21st century may live under the shadow of water strangulation. And if the international community does not build new law against the weaponization of waterways, then every river, every strait, every canal, every maritime artery, every downstream nation will one day become hostage to the ambitions of an upstream power. Pakistan must therefore lead the argument, not as a beggar, not as a victim, not as a state pleading for sympathy, warning the world that the path India has opened is a path towards catastrophe. The treaty lives. Pakistan's rights live. The Sindhu lives, and Pakistan will not surrender the Sindhu. If the entire water supply of a country is cut off, what is that except destruction of a nation by other means? Water strangulation destroys them by thirst, hunger, crop failure, disease, migration, and social collapse. The mushroom cloud appears in one instant. The dead river kills in slow motion. But the strategic meaning is the same. The life of the nation is being attacked. Therefore, Pakistan must not allow the world to hide behind technical language. India will call it a treaty dispute. India will call it administrative abeyance. India will call it hydropower. India will call it development. India will call it a canal, a tender, a study, a survey, an engineering decision. No. A tender is not merely a tender when it is attached to the strangulation of a people. A dam is not merely a dam when it is built on the throat of a nation. A canal is not merely a canal when it proposes to convert Pakistan's lifeline into India's lever of coercion. Pakistan has publicly described attempts to stop or divert its rightful use of water as an act of war. Then let us draw the necessary conclusion. If the final act, the cutting off of Pakistan's waters, is an existential assault, then the steps leading up to that final act cannot be treated as routine. The road to catastrophe is not innocent merely because the catastrophe has not yet arrived. The enemy does not become dangerous only when the last gate is shut. He becomes dangerous when he surveys the site, when he funds the design, awards the tender, pours the concrete, and normalizes the right to decide whether Pakistanis shall drink or not. A nation that waits until the riverbed is dry has waited too long. That is why Pakistan's response must be graduated, visible, and sovereign. India must be made to understand that there is no cost-free climb up the ladder of water coercion. Every step towards the weaponization of the Indus must produce a corresponding elevation in Pakistan's national response: political, diplomatic, legal, economic, informational, defensive, and strategic. We do not seek war, but we must recognize war when it is being prepared against us. It is reckless to tell India that it may keep advancing towards Pakistan's existential threshold while Pakistan remains confined to press releases and appeals for understanding. Deterrence fails when red lines become academic. Deterrence fails when adversaries believe he can move step by step, brick by brick, file by file, until the unthinkable becomes normal. Deterrence survives only when the adversary understands that every movement toward the red line carries consequence, risk, and national resistance. This is not a call for panic. This is a call for seriousness. This is not a call for adventurism. It is a call for clarity. This is not a call for Pakistan to abandon law. It is a call for Pakistan to make law, diplomacy, preparedness, and deterrence speak in one voice. India placed the Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance as part of Operation Sindhu. Pakistan has treated the suspension as unlawful while preparing legal action and warning that waters diversions would be an act of war. So let the world hear this from Pakistan. We will not allow India to redefine aggression as engineering. We will not allow India to redefine coercion as development. We will not allow India to redefine treaty violation as national security. And we will not allow India to place its hand on the throat of the Indus and then ask Pakistan to behave as though nothing strategic has happened. The Indus is not an ordinary river. It is the civilizational artery of Pakistan. It feeds our fields. It sustains our cities, powers our economy, and binds our federation. To threaten the Indus is to threaten Pakistan itself. And when Pakistan itself is threatened, Pakistan must respond as a state whose survival is at stake. Not tomorrow, not after the last drop, not after the world has held 20 conferences and issued 30 statements of concern. Pakistan must respond at the beginning of escalation, because that is where deterrence either succeeds or dies. The message to India must be unmistakable. You cannot suspend the treaty and expect normal relations. You cannot prepare structures of coercion and expect strategic quiet. You cannot turn water into weapon and expect Pakistan to treat it as paperwork. You cannot march towards an existential threshold and demand that Pakistan remain diplomatically polite. The world has just seen what happens when a waterway becomes a weapon. The Strait of Hormuz is called an artery of the global economy because energy flows through it. The Indus is more than that. It is an artery of national survival. If the closure of Hormuz can shake markets, then the strangulation of the Indus can shake region. That is why the world needs new international law against the weaponization of water. Whether it is a strait, a canal, a river, or a basin, a waterway that sustains civilians must not be converted into a weapon. The law must recognize that in the age of climate stress, water aggression is as destabilizing as military aggression. Pakistan must lead that argument, but Pakistan must also understand that law without power is a petition. Power without law is chaos. We need both. We need the legal case, the diplomatic case, the humanitarian case, the climate case, and the deterrence case. Above all, we need national unity. The Indus belongs to the farmer of Sindh, the grower of Punjab, the worker of Karachi, the family of Balochistan, the mountains of Pakhtunkhwa, and is the future of every Pakistani child. We build resilience because Pakistan must be strong, not because India has the right to steal. We preserve water because our future demands wisdom, not because we accept blackmail. We prepare for scarcity, but we do not legitimize strangulation. The treaty lives, Pakistan's rights live, the Sindhu lives. And any state that imagines Pakistan will surrender the Sindhu has misunderstood our history, our politics, our people, and our resolve. We are a nation born of struggle. We have endured wars and sanctions and floods and terrorism and isolation and betrayal. We are still here. As long as the Sindhu flows through the body of Pakistan, Pakistan will not bow. Let no one misunderstand us. Pakistan's deterrence does not begin when the last drop has vanished. Deterrence begins when the adversary first moves towards the strangulation of a nation. If total water denial is an existential threat, then the path towards total water denial is not innocent. A survey, a tender, a canal, a dam, a diversion, a legal fiction called abeyance, each must be treated not as paperwork, but as movement towards that strategic threshold. Pakistan must make the world understand that the Indus is not a bargaining chip. It is the bloodstream of our republic. To threaten it is to threaten the survival of our state. And when survival is threatened, all instruments of national power become relevant. Diplomacy, law, economy, public mobilization, defense preparedness, and strategic deterrence. We are not discussing irrigation. We are discussing coercion. We are not discussing canals. We are discussing the deliberate manufacture of famine, migration, economic collapse, and national paralysis. A weaponized river can destroy a country in slow motion. The life of a people is under attack. Therefore, India must be told clearly, do not climb this ladder and imagine that Pakistan will remain at the bottom. Do not move brick by brick towards our strangulation and expect only memoranda from Islamabad. Do not mistake Pakistan's appeal for international law for strategic helplessness. We seek peace but not surrender. We seek law but not helplessness. We seek restraint but not national suicide. The Sindhu is not India's weapon. The Sindhu is Pakistan's lifeline, and any attempt to turn that lifeline into a noose must be answered with the full seriousness of a nation defending its existence. The Indus is not merely an artery of Pakistan's economy. It is the bloodstream of Pakistan itself. The Indus is not a river on the map. The Indus is Pakistan in motion. And therefore, India places Indus Waters Treaty in abeyance when India threatens to divert waters that sustain Pakistan, when Indian ministers speak of taking water that flows to Pakistan and sending it elsewhere. This is not paperwork. This is not engineering. This is not administration. This is the weaponization of water. Let no one in New Delhi, Islamabad, Washington, Beijing, London, Riyadh, Tehran, and the United Nations pretend that this is a normal dispute. Pakistan has said that any attempt to divert the flow of water belonging to Pakistan is an act of war. The phrase act of war must not be uttered casually, but once uttered, it must not be hollow. If water strangulation is an act of war, then steps towards water strangulation cannot be treated as acts of peace. If the final cutting off of Pakistan's water would be an existential assault, then the road to that assault is not innocent. The survey is not innocent. The tender is not innocent. The canal is not innocent. The dam is not innocent. The legal fiction of abeyance is not innocent. A noose does not become dangerous only when the neck is broken. It becomes dangerous when it is tied. Therefore, let us say clearly what others are afraid to say. To cut off the waters of Pakistan is to place Pakistan under strategic attack. If the life of the nation is under assault, then Pakistan cannot wait until the riverbed is dry before it wakes up. A state that waits for the last drop has already surrendered the first principle of deterrence. Deterrence is not a speech after defeat. Deterrence is a warning that prevents defeat. So the argument before Pakistan is simple. Every Indian step towards coercive control of Pakistan's waters must be treated as strategic escalation. Every legal fiction, every engineering project, every attempt to normalize unilateral power over Pakistan's lifeline must be answered by corresponding elevation and escalation in Pakistan's national security posture. Not hysteria, not adventurism, not empty shouting, but seriousness, visible seriousness, sovereign seriousness. India must not be allowed to climb the ladder of water coercion while Pakistan is kept at the bottom, issuing press releases. India must not be allowed to move brick by brick towards our strangulation where the world calls for restraint only from the victim. India must not be allowed to convert hydrology into hostility and then hide behind the vocabulary of development. A dam is not merely a dam when it is built on the throat of a nation. A canal is not merely a canal when it is designed to make a people thirsty. A treaty violation is not merely a treaty violation when the treaty protects the lifeline of more than 200 million people. Let the world hear this. Pakistan does not seek war, but Pakistan must recognize when war is being prepared against us. We do not seek confrontation, but we will not accept national suicide as the price of appearing reasonable. The international community must stop treating water aggression as a lesser form of aggression. Whether it is the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal, the Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, or the Indus, waterways that sustain civilian life and global stability cannot be turned into weapons of coercion. There must be a new international convention against the weaponization of waterways, a convention that says no state may use civilian water dependence as a weapon, a convention that says no upstream power may hold a downstream people hostage, a convention that says no maritime checkpoint may be closed to blackmail, a convention that says water is not a weapon, a convention that says thirst is not diplomacy, a convention that says famine is not statecraft. We must take the climate case to every summit. We must take the diplomatic case to every capital. And Pakistan must make the deterrence case to every strategist who thinks South Asia can survive casual experiments with the Indus. The treaty lives, Pakistan's rights live, the Indus lives. Projects already approved before India's unilateral actions, our reservoirs, our dams, our barrages, our flood systems, our canals, our capacity stores, all must be strengthened because Pakistan needs water security. We are strengthening Pakistan because we have a duty to survive. Resilience is not surrender. Preparedness is not acceptance. Conversion is not concession. Pakistan must prepare for scarcity without legitimizing strangulation. And let us be honest about the wider war being waged against Pakistan. This is not only a water dispute. This is one front in a broader campaign: pressure at the borders, proxy violence, propaganda, failed attempts at diplomatic isolation, economic coercion, hybrid warfare, and now the threat of hydrological coercion. This is a war by other means. A bullet is not the only weapon. A blockade is a weapon, a sanction can be a weapon, a lie can be a weapon, a proxy can be a weapon, a river can be made into a weapon. And when the river is the Indus, the weapon is aimed at the heart of Pakistan. So let us rise above party, above province, above faction, above the smallness that has too often made Pakistan vulnerable. We do not ask for charity, we demand law. Pakistan was not created to accept thirst as our destiny. The Indus is older than both our flags. It has seen empires come and go. They have all passed. The river remains. Pakistan will remain. The Indus is not negotiable. The Sindhu is not for surrender. Marsu, Marsu, Sindhu na desu. Thank you.
पार्टी बिलावल भुट्टो जरदारी सेमिनार से खिताब कर रहे थे। उन्होंने कहा कि सिंध पर सिर्फ दरियाए सिंध पर सिंधियों का हक है। भारत को ये तासर नहीं मिलना चाहिए कि पाकिस्तान पर दबाव बढ़ता जा रहा है। उनका कहना था कि मौसर दिफा इस वक्त मुमकिन है जब मुखालिफ फरीक ये जान ले ये किसी घबराहट या मुहिम जोई की दावत नहीं है। बिलावल भुट्टो जरदारी ने अपने खिताब में कहा कि ये वक्त हमें संजीदगी, वाज़ेह हिकमत अमली और हुकूक के दिफा का मुतालबा करता है। दरियाए सिंध महज एक दरिया नहीं बल्कि एक तहजीब और करोड़ों इंसानों की ज़िंदगी है। उन्होंने कहा कि पाकिस्तान अपने आबी हुकूक के तहफ़्फ़ुज़ के लिए हर जायज़ और कानूनी इक़दाम को उठाएगा। चेयरमैन पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी ने अपने खिताब में कहा कि भारत को यह तासर नहीं मिलना चाहिए कि वो पाकिस्तान पर दबाव बढ़ा रहा है, बल्कि ये सिर्फ एक एहतजाज तक महदूद रहे। ये जान ले कि सुर्ख लकीर अबूर की तो उसे सज़ा मिलेगी। ये घबराहट या मुहिम जोई की दावत नहीं है। पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी के चेयरमैन ने कहा कि ये वक्त हमें संजीदगी, वाज़ेह हिकमत अमली और हुकूक के दिफा का हमसे मुतालबा करता है। इस्लामाबाद में पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी के चेयरमैन बिलावल भुट्टो ज़रदारी खिताब कर रहे थे। अपने खिताब में उन्होंने कहा कि सिंध के पानी पर सिंध के लोगों का हक है और वो किसी को नहीं दिया जा सकता। भारत ने हमेशा से सिंध तास माहदे की खिलाफ वर्जी की है। बिलावल भुट्टो का कहना था कि हमने हमेशा अमन की कोशिश की है और बारहा ये कोशिश की है कि हम किसी भी जंग की तरफ ना जाएं, लेकिन ऐसा ना हो कि मुस्तकबिल में हर दरिया, आबनाए नहर और ज़ेर बहाव के जो चीज़ें हैं ये फिर दोबारा जंग की तरफ जो है ना चली जाएं। और आपको बताएं नाज़रीन कि ये एक अहम और बड़ा सेमिनार है जिससे खिताब करते हुए उन्होंने कहा कि सिंतास माहिदे के तहत पाकिस्तानियों के लिए हिस्से का पानी, उसका तहफ़्फ़ुज़ यकीनी बनाया जाना चाहिए। बिलावल ने कहा कि पानी को महज तकनीकी तनाज़ा नहीं है बल्कि कौमी सलामती के तौर पर उठाया जा सकता है। आपको बताएं नाज़रीन कि इस्लामाबाद में एक सेमिनार से ख़िताब करते हुए पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी के चेयरमैन बिलावल भुट्टो ज़रदारी ने कहा कि सिंतास माहिदे के तहत पाकिस्तान के हिस्से के पानी का तहफ़्फ़ुज़ यकीनी बनाया जाना चाहिए। बिलावल भुट्टो ज़रदारी ने कहा कि पानी को महज तकनीकी तनाज़े नहीं बल्कि कौमी सलामती के मसले के तौर पर देखा जा रहा है। बिलावल भुट्टो ज़रदारी ने कहा कि सिंतास माहिदे के तहत पाकिस्तान के हिस्से के पानी का तहफ़्फ़ुज़ किया जाना ज़रूरी है। पाकिस्तान पीपल्स पार्टी के चेयरमैन बिलावल भुट्टो ज़रदारी सेमिनार से खिताब कर रहे थे। इंटरनेशनल सेमिनार से खिताब करते हुए उनका कहना था कि सिंध के पानी पर सिंध के लोगों का हक़ है। बिलावल का कहना था कि सिंध के लोग इसके लिए अपनी जान दे सकते हैं। सिंध महज एक दरिया नहीं बल्कि एक तहज़ीब का नाम है। सिंध, जहलम और चनाब के पानी पर पाकिस्तान का हक़ है। पानी महज तकनीकी तनाज़ा नहीं, कौमी सलामती के मसले के तौर भी देखा जाना चाहिए।
Center for China and Globalization, Beijing, and who's been honorably introduced already.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to come to Islamabad again to attend today's IWT seminar. You may remember about 1 year ago, in May and June 2025, when India started to threaten to stop the flow of water in the Indus River to Pakistan, when the Indian Prime Minister Modi started to threaten not to allow a single drop of water to flow from the Indus River to Pakistan. I was interviewed by a major Indian television, and I declared, in times of peace, to threaten to stop the flow of water to the downstream country, where hundreds of millions would depend on the water, it will be a crime against humanity. In times of war, if you stop the flow of water to the hundreds of millions of people in the downstream region, it will be a war crime. And I urged India not to do so. Further, I emphasized, strictly speaking, while Pakistan is the hundreds of millions of people in the downstream region, it will be a war crime. And I urged India not to do so. Further, I emphasized, strictly speaking, while Pakistan is the downstream country, India is not exactly the upstream nation. You know, the Indus rivers and many of the tributaries actually flow from the Himalayas. And I emphasized, don't do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you. The anchor asked me, are you threatening India? I said, no, I'm not threatening India. This wise saying, don't do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you, was said by Confucius about 2,500 years ago. It has been generally accepted as wisdom by the Chinese nation. So I said, allow me to repeat this 3 times for your benefit. So I repeated it for another 3 times. And I want to say that again to India. Don't do unto others what you don't want others to do unto you, because strictly speaking, as far as Indus River is concerned, India is not exactly the upstream country. And China and Pakistan, fully respecting each other, can really do many things together to make sure the IWT clauses should be strictly abided by. I'm very much impressed today to hear all the good remarks, excellent speeches, very eloquent remarks made by many of the representatives, many of which I fully agree. Allow me to make several points of my own in my personal capacity. First of all, to deal with the violation of the IWT should be fully exposed and should be stopped as much as we can. In this sense, in my personal capacity, I want to fully support the positions taken by many of the Pakistani speakers. Secondly, as I mentioned, China and Pakistan should cooperate fully on this particular point. While the IWT itself should be fully protected, I think, theoretically speaking, we could also start to think about a trilateral agreement involving China, India, and Pakistan, the three countries constituting the real upstream country, the midstream country, and the downstream country, to make sure that the flow of the water should not be interrupted and should be better managed. Much of it has been reflected in the IWT clauses already. Thirdly, allow me to emphasize that I counted on my fingers, actually, there are about altogether 18 countries which depend on the water flown from rivers originating from the what we call Qinghai Tibet Plateau. This is very significant. I understand up to today there is no regional or international framework which would focus on this commonality of the water originating from the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. And the Indus River water is important in itself, but on a more general and macro framework, it's part of this commonality of the water originating from the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. So while the urgency is to deal with the violations of the IWT treaty itself, I think we should also spare time to think about whether all these countries together should think about and work together to come up with a framework so that common standards, common rules, regulations, and the best code of conduct should be introduced, not only between India and Pakistan, but also with many other countries. The 18 countries also not only exist here in the Indian subcontinent, which is the focus of our discussion today, but also exists in Southeast Asia as well as in Central Asia. I hope if we have a better code of conduct for all these 18 countries, and the rules of conduct should be endorsed and accepted by the United Nations, for example, and generally accepted by the international community. In that sense, I hope in the future, after this violation of the IWT will eventually be resolved, hopefully peacefully rather than violently, all the countries in this part of the world which depend on the water originating from the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau should live in greater peace. Now, please also allow me to make another additional point. I highly admire the good offices, the mediation done by the Pakistani government and the Pakistani people, led by Your Great Excellency, the Prime Minister, and the great Field Marshal, the Chief of Staff of the Pakistani Army. I hope they will continue to work in the right direction to make sure peace will prevail eventually between the United States and Iran. Now, someone talked about the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Allow me to emphasize, as the President of Germany emphasized before, the Strait of Hormuz was open for navigation before the war against Iran started. So we need to address the issue which gave rise to the war against Iran, and we should work together to make sure that the Strait of Hormuz eventually will remain open for free navigation, and no country, for example, India, should be tolerated or allowed to deny the free flow of water in the Indus River to the hundreds of millions of people in Pakistan. Finally, I want to place a bet. If the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the Field Marshal of Pakistan continue to work in the right direction, I hope they will earn or share a Nobel Peace Prize. That's my best wish. To make the real final point, no one in this part of the world should second-guess China's commitment to defend the fundamental interest of Pakistan, especially including Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. And in the context of our meeting today, Pakistani people's right to the free flow of water in the Indus River. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Victor Gao, for reminding us of geography and the interest we have in preserving our natural resources for all of us and not to divide them in any way. The second speaker for the Defense University will be taking the podium.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's a matter of great honor for me to be here today speaking on this subject of great importance. If the slides, gentlemen, is with me, yes, and which is primarily located in Pakistan. For Pakistan, needless to say, it is a complete civilizational ecosystem that supports the country's agriculture, economy, energy requirements, and broadly the larger sustainability. It is an ecosystem within which Pakistan lives and thrives. Hence, any intention of taking Pakistan's waters or any measures that are taken is a very, very serious threat to Pakistan's national security, and it constitutes the most vital national interest for us. Enough has already been said about it, but I will now take you. The origins of the treaty lay in an event. It did not happen through good faith alone. The event was that in 1948, April, incidentally, it was April again. Like in April 2025, India illegally, immorally held the treaty in abeyance and is still doing it. It was April 1948 when India, for the first time, stopped Pakistan's waters. The eastern rivers had some headworks which were feeding into the canals which were irrigating lands in Punjab. That water was stopped. And that was the trigger point from where the discourse and the discussion started, that an upper riparian cannot and should not do it. And it took 10 long years of negotiations. And it was negotiated under the auspices of international experts and the World Bank, fundamentally the World Bank, and in 1960 the treaty was signed in Karachi. And this treaty became a gold standard. This treaty even today is a gold standard. It is a treaty which was designed actually to prevent another layer of very serious conflict between the two countries. It was a treaty which was designed to protect a civilization. And it was a treaty which actually, somebody said it in the first session, it was a bargain between the eastern rivers and the western rivers. And the eastern rivers were given completely to India, and for right or wrong reasons, but that's how the treaty stands. So now the intention seems to have completely changed. We'll talk about it a little more. I'll just briefly, can you run the, there are basically 12 articles of the treaty. One, first of course, is the definitions, and second is the eastern rivers, which are all with India. The western rivers, which is the main question, it allots western rivers to Pakistan. India is allowed restricted use of water under strict limits. We'll talk about it, because we have to be real. We're in a real situation here. And then the replacement works, Pakistan was to build the replacement works for the eastern river canals. The eastern river canals were not being fed now from the eastern rivers, that is Ravi, Beas and Satluj. They were to be fed from the western rivers, and the link canals and the headworks and the entire system was created after this treaty was done. And a lot of financial help and support came from all over the world. And let me also tell you, at that time, let's not take everything away from what Mr. Modi is doing from the previous Indian administrations, because they upheld the treaty. Under difficult situations also, the treaty was upheld. So Indians also paid for replacement works, which was part of the treaty, apart from others. The financial provisions we have already talked about, fund replacement works in Pakistan. This was done by the World Bank, this is done by the United States, this is done by India also. And exchange of data, it has been violated. This is the first serious violation which has started a long time back. And this is a very serious question. Next, please. Permanent in this water commission, they were to meet on a yearly basis. This is the main place where they were to talk to each other and resolve issues which used to come up on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. This is not happening. This is a serious violation of the treaty. It has not happened in May 2020 or April 2020. It was happening before that time. So the intention was very clear from the Indian side, or the malintention, so to say. So dispute settlement, it's a three-layered process. It has already been explained. First, it is to be negotiated by the Indus Water Commissions. If there's a problem, it is to be taken to the technical problem, neutral experts, and if the legal advice is to be taken, then the court of arbitration. India has run out from there as well, because they don't have a legal ground to stand on. Emergency provisions, those have already exhausted, that time is gone, that was to be done in 1965. And the general provisions, this is a very important provision. It does not impinge upon any territorial claims, because the waters that come to Pakistan emanate from China, and the Tibetan plain, run through Indian-occupied Kashmir, which is a disputed territory. So, by a very serious legal definition, India is not an upper riparian, and then they enter Pakistan from there. Obviously, that provision is a very important provision which we cannot ignore, and this is very important thing which, once somebody holds a treaty in abeyance or abrogates the treaty, would mean something more for Pakistan than just the waters. Final provision, of course, is a treaty cannot be modified without mutual agreement, and that India has already done. So, in my opinion, the treaty has been violated grossly. And it is one of the most serious national security threats that Pakistan has faced since its inception. Next, please. Now, this is what IWT allows to India. It allows domestic use of water on the western rivers. It allows non-consumptive use, that the water cannot be consumed beyond a certain limit. Hydropower generation through run-of-the-river projects with specific design constraints, which means India should not develop a system by which it can regulate the flow of waters according to its will and wish. That is the fundamental argument in this. And then IWT caps the cumulative storage of water over 3 western rivers. And this is 3.6 million acre-feet of water. And this is important to note. And while Chenab, IWT allows 1.7 million acre-feet of storage without disrupting the flows of waters. That is the caveat. So basically, the restrictions were designed to prevent India to manipulate the river flows against Pakistan. India is violating this. Consistently, it is moving in the direction where it can gain control over the flows. Next, please. Then the strategic rupture took place. It was happening by design. It was going on for quite some time. India used the statements you have already heard from various Indian ministers and the Prime Minister in the Indian intent of going away from the treaty. it was basically part of a strategy that India has adopted for the last 10 years. Let's not be mistaken. It is not an isolated incident. Pahalgam was used as a trigger. There is no evidence that Pahalgam was done by anybody. Even if it was done, it is to be treated in a very different way in the international system and bilateral between the two states. So it is, you have to see this abeyance in a larger construct, which is an indirect strategy which India has adopted, at least for the last 10 years, very openly. It is to isolate and weaken Pakistan. Part of this is the proxy wars which are happening in Pakistan. Part of it was economic thing. Part of it was the narrative thing, the cognitive domain, put Pakistan in bad light around the world. So this was in the larger construct things were happening, and hence abeyance of this treaty. There were, however, important thing to note that there was a discussion in India before that also. There were two schools of thought. One was talking about that things have changed, climate change and demography and others, and therefore there has to be a cooperative model with Pakistan on which modification of the treaty is to be done. That model is not a bad model of discussion, but the other was, which was saying right from the start, that India, more water was given to Pakistan and this treaty has been unfair to India and all. But then the policy of Mr. Modi and his government to indirectly put pressure on Pakistan or directly put pressure on Pakistan, combine this with the state action. Quickly, what is the situation on the hydro infrastructure on the western rivers, which are the rivers of concern for Pakistan? Next, please. River Indus, there are two projects which have been completed. The third one is proposed, and these projects have minimal storage capacity and has a minimal impact on the water flows. So therefore, these projects, Pakistan has not really talked about these projects to anybody because these fall within the treaty system. Jhelum, there are 5 projects, out of which 4 projects have been completed. The 5th project is underway. The only project which bothered Pakistan is the Kishan Ganga Dam, which is restricting the flows to a Pakistani hydro project, which is Neelam Jhelum project. Otherwise, so far, the Indian capacity or the system that they have is not to interrupt with the flows of Jhelum waters. Next, please. The real concern, the real thing is Chenab. Most of the Indian hydropower projects are concentrated here. Currently, there are 4 projects which have combined capacity. These are operationalized projects, 4 projects. They have a combined capacity of 0.376 million acre feet of storage. There are 5 projects which are under construction, and by 2029, those will be completed. Chenab-Beas link canal will divert, now this is a very serious violation, divert waters from Chenab to Beas, which is from a western river to the eastern rivers. And India has planned another 13 projects beyond 2030 or 2035. And that is the serious concern that we are talking about. So quickly, the next slide, please. The impact assessment. This is the impact assessment. They've accelerated all their projects. The cascade integration. This is the serious thing. The projects on Chenab, I'm talking about the Chenab. Now, there are a number of projects on Chenab. If one water flow is managed at one, is released in a calibrated way to the other, is managed there, and so on and so forth, when it reaches Pakistan, you almost can have total control over the flow of the water. And you can release the water according to your wish and will, and can use it for coercion, which forms a very serious threat to Pakistan's national security. Next, please. So this is by about the second last slide I have very quickly. These are the 5 pillar strategy, in my humble opinion, that Pakistan should adopt. First is obviously IWT has to be kept alive at all costs. And therefore, all international legal discourses have to be fully activated. We have to remove dependence on Indian data that does not take responsibility from India to not provide us data, but we have to become self-reliant also by creating a hydrological intelligence cell. And I repeat again, that does not mean that India is absolved of what India is doing, which is illegal and immoral by any stretch of imagination. But we need to create our own hydrological intelligence cell. Pakistan will be able to see early, plan early, and respond early. We have to build our internal buffers because all these have been discussed before. There are dams, there are headworks which need to be now fast-tracked. Canal reforms, groundwater, I think Mr. Bilawal Bhutto talked about it, and groundwater recharge. So this is not just the requirement because what India has done, this is the requirement of the scarcity of water, the climate change that is affecting waters in Pakistan. We have to also counter the panic. It is a serious situation, but it is not a situation of panic. And that is, we understand that what India can do with these rivers and what India cannot, what is technically possible, what is geographically, the geography that allows it, and what is not possible. India must not enjoy that psychological leverage over Pakistan. And that must be corrected in the public communication also. Last but not the least, there are red lines, and that is red lines without reckless escalation. So, but India's question is to be deterred, and the crisis is to be controlled. And we have the means to do it. Next slide, please. Next, because this is going to be. These are the three fundamental things. It is a serious threat. The buildup of the Indians on the river Chenab is a serious threat to Pakistan's national security, goes without saying. Pakistan's strongest argument is not that India can dry our rivers. The strongest argument is that an upper riparian state is trying to convert a functioning water treaty into a political punishment tool. If this becomes a precedent, it will no longer be a problem of South Asia. I thank you.
Thank you, Lieutenant General. Now we'll turn on to our final speaker for this panel, Ms. Laurie A. Watkins, who's an author and global policy expert from the United States of America. And I believe she's also taking the podium.
I want to start with something I think we all know, but always don't say plainly. The Indus Waters Treaty is one of the genuine success stories of international diplomacy. It was built to do something extraordinarily hard: give two countries that have fought multiple wars a legal and technical framework for sharing something they both need to survive. And for over 60 years, it worked. What I've been asked to look at this afternoon is the broader picture: how river treaties around the world are designed to prevent conflict, what makes their institutions strong or fragile, and what the global framework of water law has to say about where we are right now. And I think when you look at the comparative record, the Danube, the Mekong, the Nile, the picture is actually clarifying, not discouraging, because it tells us very precisely what works, what's at risk, and what needs to be protected. The International Commission for the Protection of the Danube River, the ICPDR, spans 15 parties, including countries that were on opposite sides of the Cold War. Its legal foundation in the 1994 Danube River Protection Convention. And here's the telling detail. That convention includes a small dispute settlement mechanism. It has never once had to be used. Not because there are no tensions, there are, but because the technical working groups meet regularly, they share data, and resolve differences before they become political crises. That is exactly what institutional conflict prevention looks like when it's working. The Mekong tells a more cautionary story. Scholars studying that basin have found explicitly that withholding hydrological data can itself incite regional conflict, that controlling data becomes a political weapon. The Mekong River Commission established a formal data sharing procedures back in 2001, but implementation remained weak for years. It wasn't until 2020 that an agreement was reached with China to share river-level data twice daily and year-round. The lesson is direct. When the flow of information stops, trust erodes, and the space for miscalculation grows. Pakistan has written to India 3 times, twice in 2025 and again in May of 2026, about abnormal and abrupt flow variations on the Chenab. That is not a procedural complaint. That is a downstream country losing visibility into what is happening upstream. The Mekong experience tells us exactly how dangerous that is. The Nile Basin Cooperative Framework Agreement, which finally entered into force in 2024, drew almost word for word on the 1997 UN Watercourses Convention, codifying the principle of equitable and reasonable use, the obligation not to cause significant harm, and mandatory data exchange. The Nile case shows us something important. Even when bilateral arrangements fracture, customary international law remains as the underlying framework. States cannot simply exit their obligations by declaring a treaty suspended. The law does not work that way. The 1997 UN Watercourses Convention is the authoritative global framework on shared rivers. Its core principles, equitable use, no significant harm, prior notification before major upstream actions, and regular data exchange. These are not just treaty obligations for the countries that signed it. They reflect customary international law, which is binding on all states regardless of signature. The International Court of Justice confirmed this in the Gabchek-Kavau Naj Marosh case, a dispute fittingly over suspended treaty on the Danube. The court held that customary water law obligations persist even when one party claims a treaty has been suspended. You cannot unilaterally walk away from the legal framework simply by announcing that you have. The Permanent Court of Arbitration, the PCA, made that directly relevant to the Indus Basin. In its June 2025 supplemental award, the court found that India's declaration of abeyance does not end the tribunal's jurisdiction. The treaty's dispute resolution architecture, the very machinery built to prevent escalation, continues to function. And in May of 2026, the court issued an award on the question of maximum pondage that substantively affirmed limits on upstream water control. India has rejected both. But rejection is not the same as nullification. An arbitral award does not disappear when a party calls it illegal. Paktansun Serwanda treaties must be performed in good faith. You heard another speaker say that earlier today. This is not a polite aspiration. It is the foundation on which the entire system of international agreements rests. When it is eroded in one place, the consequences reach far beyond that basin. Against that comparative backdrop, I want to say something clearly. The Permanent Indus Commission is, by any global standard, a remarkable institution. Senior engineers with diplomatic standing, a mandatory meeting schedule, inspection rights, a tiered dispute ladder, commission to neutral expert to court arbitration that is specifically designed to catch problems at the lowest possible levels before they climb. The academic literature on the Commission notes that it resolved the vast majority of questions brought to it across 6 decades, through 3 wars, military standoffs, and sustained political tension. No other bilateral water commission has been stress tested that way and survived. That is an institution worth protecting. But here's what the Danube, Mekong, and Nile all show us consistently. Commissions prevent conflict, not primarily by resolving legal disputes. They prevent conflict by maintaining contact. Regular meetings build familiarity. Joint inspections create shared technical understanding. Data exchange removes the information gaps that feed political suspicion. When that contact is severed, when inspections are refused, when data goes dark, when commission meetings lapse, the buffer disappears, and the downstream consequences, in the most literal sense, fall on Pakistan. The seminar documentation for today identifies exactly that pattern on the Indus. Reduced cooperation on inspections, incomplete data exchange, erosion of regular commission engagement. I want to be direct about what the comparative record says. That sequence is not a diplomatic inconvenience. It is the early warning signal that the institutional safeguards are in fact failing. Based on what the comparative record shows, I'd like to offer 4 things that the international community and this convention should be pressing for. Restore commission engagement unconditionally. The permanent Indus Commission must meet. Its mandate is not contingent on the state of political relations. That is the entire point and reason for building a technical institution. The meeting schedule is a legal obligation, not a diplomatic favor. Mandate real time for data showing all flow variations. Pakistan's documented concerns about the Chenab are precisely the kind of issue the Commission exists to address. The data must flow, and it must flow in both directions, transparently. Respect the arbitral process. The Court of Arbitration has jurisdiction. Its awards are valid. A state that disagrees with a tribunal's competence has legal avenues to contest that. But non-participation and rejection do not make the awards just disappear. The international community should say so clearly. Affirm that abeyance has no basis in international water law, the 1997 Watercourses Convention, the ICJ, and the PCA have all pointed in exactly the same direction. Unilateral suspension of a treaty's obligations is not a recognized legal act under the framework governed by shared watercourses. I want to close with this. The Indus Waters Treaty matters beyond the Indus Basin. It is one of the clearest demonstrations in history that international institutions can manage water conflict even between adversaries. That proof of concept matters to every shared river basin in the world, and there are 310 of them. What is happening right now is not just a bilateral dispute. It is a test of whether treaty-based cooperation can be abandoned unilaterally when it becomes politically inconvenient, and whether the international community will say anything about it. The institutions that were built to keep the water from becoming a cause of war must be allowed to function. For 240 million people whose lives depend on the Indus, there is no alternative. Thank you.
should seriously consider acceding to the UN Water Course Convention of 1997. I'm Dr. Anjum from Climate Program of IRS. My question is for Ms. Laurie Watkins. Actually, I believe that Pakistan should seriously consider acceding to the UN Water Course Convention of 1997 and UN ECE Water Convention of 1992. To strengthen its legal standing and to reinforce transboundary water governance. And it will also complement Indus Water Treaty's effective implementation. So what's your opinion about opting for this approach? And what do you think would be tangible diplomatic and legal benefits of this accession? Thank you.
Well, I hope that I went into those specifics. I listed those 4 areas, but I think one of the things that I'm not seeing right now is the rest of the international community stepping up, right? They need to step up and they need to speak up as well. And every panelist that's been here today has said that we are all in this together. I don't consider this just a Pakistan-India issue. I live in America. I'm here because this is important. And water being used as a weapon is catastrophic. It is literally life and death for people, and that's what I hope people focus on, is that fact, because there are conflicts going on all around the world. There is a loss of fuel, there is a loss of things that provide, that we need to have energy to pump water filtration systems, etc. So the fact if you don't have water, but you also don't have fuel because of another conflict that's happening at the same time, it's absolutely a recipe for disaster. So I do feel globally, if we're going to maintain global order, that we all are in this together, and we all need to speak up for one another and be good partners. Thank you.
Okay, any other question? Okay, the gentleman in the front row.
Thank you so much. My name is Muhammad Ali. I'm a policy analyst. My question is aimed at our Chinese friend, Professor Victor Gao. You mentioned something very profound when you chose your words carefully by mentioning India as a middle riparian, not the upper riparian, which I understand as stressing the point that actually Indus starts from China. So in that context, I also appreciate when you express solidarity and support for Pakistan's territorial integrity and national security. So in tangible terms, what should Pakistan expect, both in terms of diplomatic, legal, and strategic support from Beijing? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I made the comments in my personal capacity. I think the fact that India is not the real upstream country is very significant, because if China and Pakistan cooperate, and I hope they will, find the will and the commitment to cooperate, we can, in addition to whatever that needs to be done to straighten out all the provisions in the IWT treaty itself, create a situation where India may be deterred from playing rough against Pakistan. Now, how that can be done technically, what can be lined up between China, the real upstream country, and Pakistan, the real downstream country, together, vis-a-vis the midstream country, if I may say so, That is the key. I think it would require a lot of wisdom and technical expertise to find out what exactly can be done. Now, further, between China and India, China is always on the upstream, not only as far as India's river, Indus River is concerned, Brahmaputra, for example, and quite a few others flowing from the Himalayas, sometimes through Nepal, Bhutan, further down into India. So I think some message can be prepared to inform India that you should not play rough against a downstream country like Pakistan, which happens to be an ironclad friend of China, and there is tremendous amount of goodwill in my country towards the people here in Pakistan, and I think the Chinese government may also decide not to spare any resources to make sure that Pakistan is not being played rough by the midstream country. Now, how exactly things can be lined up so that India can be deterred from doing the wrong thing as far as, you know, this IWT clauses are concerned, that's the key. I'm happy to, you know, have a private chat with you if you are interested to see what exactly can be done. So my point is simple. Looking at the IWT itself is important, and I support whatever that can be done correctly, properly within that framework. But my concern is that if India has already decided to play rough against Pakistan, simply going through the framework and the parameters of the treaty itself may not solve the problem in a timely manner, and while nothing should be stopped in this direction, some alternative options probably need to be prepared as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gao, in your very personal capacity, as you always love to say, for issuing those, we could call them alternate warning system to our neighbor by an ironclad friend. Might be very useful at this time. I think we have time for one last question, and we'd ask the lady in the second row.
Assalamu alaikum. So my name is Saima Sukhera, and my question is from General Amir. So as you've been on different key appointments and you know all the strategic ins and outs and pros and cons of India, Pakistan both, so you still think that Indus Water Treaty still fits for purpose in the era of climate change, or it still needs a serious renegotiation? Thank you.
Okay. This question should have been better asked from climate experts and the technical experts, but the fact remains that this was not the Indian logic to hold the treaty in abeyance. This was not the logic which was used by India to start violating the treaty even before April 25. Their logic is simple. It is a logic which is born out of a coercive strategy which has been part of India's game for last many years. However, that be on one side, if there is we all know that there are changes in the climate, there are glacial melts, there, you know, lots of other things have changed. Demographies have also altered, and water usage has also changed. Indus Water Commission was always there. They stopped meeting a long time back before April 25 with the Indus Commissioner. All these things could have been together in good faith by the researchers, by the scientists, should have been discussed to frame the broader parameters within which the climate change and all the other changes could fit in. And then the treaty had to, because this is a very gold standard treaty, how the treaty is to be modified or kind of addendum is to be attached with the treaty, that it is in the benefit of the people of both states. But that's not the good faith so far. I'm sure there are very empowered people from the government who are sitting here. I don't think so Pakistan has ever hesitated to talk about the treaty in good faith. But if that is the intention, so far that intention has not surfaced from the present government. It is unilateral actions that they have taken, starting not only from, because I said that it is a part of a wider construct. I'm repeating the same again. What happened on 5th of May 2019, unilaterally trying to change the status of Kashmir, although they can't do it because there are 3-4 parties, international community also part of the dispute, they can't do it. But they tried to do it. And they are supporting a lot of other actions against Pakistan which are very seriously harmful to the interests of Pakistan and the people of Pakistan, particularly in the form of proxies and others. In that set, what happened in May or April 2025, they went ahead with a military action against Pakistan. And on the very next day when this happened, Pahalgam happened, they announced the treaty to be held in abeyance, which clear, and there is no evidence of Pakistan's involvement in that kind of an action in Pahalgam and all. So it seems kind of preconceived actions to corner Pakistan, which obviously Pakistan is not going to. So let's preserve the treaty first and then talk about what has materially changed in terms of climate and other things.
Thank you to our panelists and to our audience for taking part. I would now like to request the session chair for the second session, Ms. Hina Rabani Kar, to come and give your concluding remarks.
Thank you. Once again, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon to everyone, and let me acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. This is absolutely, so much has been said and in some ways also repeated in terms of what the Indus Water Treaty is, what's happening right now, what are the policy options for Pakistan, that I'm not going to try and repeat them. I'm just going to try and, perhaps in the next 7 minutes, try and look at why a country like India, which was perhaps of late, for the last many decades, vying for a seat in the Security Council, wanting to be the maker of rules in the world, in the remade world order, has decided to be the breaker of rules. What is the environment that is enabling a country to be able to get away with the stated objective of murdering, of killing a civilization, and not a peep, not a mutter, not a murmur, not a law-abiding international world coming to its defense? And there's an adage that what you do to others will eventually happen to you. So if you're not there to protect when it happens to, the precedent-setting role of what India is up to, not only in this, not only in what it calls holding in abeyance a treaty which, by the way of the treaty, cannot be held in abeyance. So before, without even going into what else is in play, or the only three issues that I want to bring your attention to, I'm going to start with reading Article 12 of the Indus Water Treaty, because sometimes I find that we keep on analyzing things without really going into how effective or what do the treaties in their essence, or any treaty in its own essence actually says. So this I read many years back, and I was like, after this, which country which wants to still function in the world as not a rogue state, but as a country which deserves a seat, forget the Security Council, but even the General Assembly, would ever be able to think it can walk itself out of a treaty like this? And Article 12 says, the provisions of this treaty may from time to time be modified by a duly ratified treaty concluding for that purpose between the two governments. And this kind of answers the question that was asked also over here, that should we renegotiate a treaty? You never renegotiate you don't end something before you have something better renegotiated. So right now, I think even to talk about anything like that would be, I think, a bit immature, if I could say that. And for the provision, I'm again quoting the Indus Water Treaty, the provisions of this treaty, this is interesting, or the provisions of this treaty as modified under the provisions of paragraph 3 shall continue in force until terminated by a duly ratified treaty concluded for that purpose between the two governments. So after this, if there are ifs, buts, abeyances, held in, suspension, any type of nomenclature, literature, fancy language, grammar, or any other language can be thought of, can be coughed up, can be vomited. But it doesn't change the fact that a country which goes against a treaty that it signed no less than by one of the founders of independent India, Jawaharlal Nehru, and Pakistan's president on the 19th of September 1960, that no country which wants to function in the world as a, forget law-abiding, as a reasonable country would ever think of doing that. So then, the question that comes to our mind is, how is India able to get away with it? It is because of the state of the world. It is because whatever you call it, whether you call it rupture, whether you call it reordering of the world, whether you call it a breakdown of the world order, whether you call it normalization of the impossible, but we all know that the architects of the previous order currently are no more the architects of the previous order, and as it was created, in some ways have not been able to hold the positions that made them the architects. And we also know that the architects of the new order are likely to not emerge from the architects of the previous order. So right now, everybody is in a flux. And there is no one who's here to preserve the international common goods, or what we call the global goods. Preserving treaties, abiding by international law, are common goods. Because today it is Pakistan's water, tomorrow it will be some other country's water. And I think from this very podium, it has been made abundantly clear by not one person, but by many. And for, interestingly, people who represent different, if I may say, institutions of Pakistan, the political institution, the military, in every which way, that Pakistan, there's a reason that we ate grass. There's a very good reason that Pakistan had to eat grass, not because Pakistan wanted to eat grass to be able to get its strategic security, but Pakistan was forced to eat grass to be able to build its strategic security. Why? Because the belligerent, roguish India had shown itself very, very early on. And this is coming from a person who expended a great deal of her time as foreign minister in trying to normalize relations with India, even at great political cost. We normalized trade relations with India because at that time, the India on the other side was the Manmohan Singh India. It was the Nehru India. It was an India which liked to abide by law. It was an India which wanted to go towards peace. It was an India which felt it still existed in the geography of the region that it inhabited. And right now, you have an India which believes it is outside of the realm of international law. It is not even breathing and eating in the geography of South Asia or the broader Middle East or whatever you call it. So it's a rogue state. It's a belligerent rogue state. And as far as India's international standing is concerned, I think I've already said it, so I'm not going to repeat it, but a rule making, a country which aspires to be sitting on the table of rule makers has to at least be rule abiding. And when it takes itself out, it is very clear as to where the brief for India's behavior is coming from. We know there's a country which is currently under trial for ICC and ICJ, and it has said that both institutions don't hold. We also know that there's a country, our neighbor, the belligerent neighbor that we have, which has been told by the Court of Arbitration that abeyance, there's no provision for unilateral abeyance. And guess what our neighbor says? It says the Court of Arbitration is not legal. It has no significance. So it's very interesting when you see it has also, as I've already said, become a denier of geography and a killer of civilization. But most importantly, I think what the world needs to wake up to, as they say famously, smell the coffee and wake up to, is that why is it that the Indus Water Treaty was considered to be a gold standard when it comes to water treaties between an upper riparian, middle riparian, and lower riparians, between an upper and lower in the broader sense. Why was it considered a gold standard? Because it was durable, it was predictable, it had a water sharing arrangement which survived 3 wars. When it could survive a full-scale war, one war in which Pakistan even lost part of its, country, when it had the ability, it had the durability, the survival rate to be able to survive something like this, what is the Indus Water Treaty not able to survive today? It is the Modiization of an India, which used to be a very different animal. And I think if the world doesn't wake up to this, today it's Pakistan, yesterday it was probably other neighbors, and very soon it will be other countries which will be in its leash. And the last thing I want to say, because in my very, very sort of optimistic view of the world and my neighborhood, because I believe that, I was born in 1977, so I was the first foreign minister who was born after 1971, and I was like, we were done with this hostility, it's over. This is what we thought when we were dealing with India. And we thought at that moment that climate change is going to be one thing, make these countries forget their long-seated, violent past and animosity for each other, and be able to close these countries together in living a common future, in preserving the environment and the waters for the common future. And within that context, I think most of us do already know that amongst the most, when it comes to melting snow and ice, the Indus Basin is one of the most in challenge all over the world. So this tells you where we're going. It's not a pretty picture from what it's looking like where we are right now. And if this goes unmitigated and unstopped, then I think what we're doing is carving out the space for a continuous hegemonic country which has been shown its place in the battlefield, may I say, very clearly. But I think it is important for other countries to play their role. And here I'm going to specifically call out on the European countries who have always held themselves as the preservers of law, as the preservers of rule. So with that, let me just congratulate once again all the panelists. They kept their time, and they were all very, very specific, and thank you all for your time.
Ms. Hina Rabbani-Carr, thank you so much. Well, we have now reached the concluding session of today's seminar, and it is my profound privilege to invite our chief guest, the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, to the podium for his words of wisdom. Senator Mohammed Ishaq Dar has had a distinguished public career spanning several decades. Besides serving as the Foreign Minister, he has served multiple terms as Minister for Finance, represented Pakistan in major international financial and diplomatic forums, and played a leading role in advancing the country's foreign policy and international partnerships. Mr. Dar, if I can invite you to the stage.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasul al-Kareem. Honorable colleagues, distinguished ambassadors and UN representatives, learned scholars and policy experts, representatives of the international and national media, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and very good afternoon. I wish to commend all the organizers of this seminar titled Indus Waters Treaty, an instrument of regional peace and security. I understand that throughout the day, leading experts from Pakistan and abroad have held meaningful discussions on one of the defining challenges of our times. Water transcends political boundaries, it sustains life, shapes civilizations, and its governance has profound implications for peace, security, and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, water is not merely a natural resource. It is the foundation of human dignity, economic prosperity, food security, and environmental sustainability. Throughout history, great civilizations have flourished along rivers, and few river systems have shaped human history as profoundly as the Indus. For thousands of years, its waters have sustained communities, cultures, and one of the world's oldest continuous civilizations. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the responsibility to preserve this shared heritage rests upon all of us. Transboundary rivers must bring nations closer through cooperation rather than divide them through confrontation. This principle is firmly embedded in international law, and has guided water sharing arrangements across the globe. It was in this spirit that Pakistan and India concluded the Indus Water Treaty in 1960 under the auspices of the World Bank. The treaty established a durable and carefully negotiated framework governing the 6 rivers to India, 3 eastern rivers to India and 3 western rivers to Pakistan, while permitting India limited use in accordance with treaty provisions. India has benefited immensely from the water storage, irrigation, and hydroelectric infrastructure built on the eastern rivers. We also do not object to India's treaty-based use of the western rivers and seek to settle any differences or disputes within the framework provided in the Indus Water Treaty itself. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the treaty demanded significant adjustments from Pakistan as it had to fundamentally restructure its irrigation and water management systems in reliance upon the permanent legal framework. Despite being disadvantaged along the banks of our eastern rivers, where due to India's unrestricted use, these rivers dried up in Pakistan, but we honored the treaty commitments and obligations in letter and spirit. That investment reflected our confidence that international agreements, once concluded, would be honored in good faith. The treaty justified that confidence. For more than 6 decades, including periods of war and political tension, it provided predictability, transparency, and stability. It has rightly been regarded as one of the most successful examples of trans-boundary water cooperation anywhere in the world. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is therefore deeply regrettable that this landmark treaty now faces its gravest challenge. India's unilateral decision to place the treaty in abeyance has no basis in the treaty itself or in the international law. Equally concerning has been the suspension of cooperation through the institutional mechanism that have been long served both countries under this treaty. Pakistan's position is very, very clear. We reject India's unilateral and illegal announcement. The Indus Waters Treaty remains valid, binding, and fully operative. No party can unilaterally suspend or terminate its obligations under a treaty that contains no such provision. This is not merely Pakistan's interpretation, it reflects the fundamental principle of international law that treaties must be performed in good faith. Our position has been vindicated by the ongoing proceedings before the Court of Arbitration constituted under the Indus Water Treaty. The Court of Arbitration has also affirmed that the Indus Water Treaty establishes a permanent legal regime governing the parties' rights and obligation over the Indus Basin. In doing so, it drew an analogy to boundary treaties, emphasizing the treaties creating stable territorial and resource allocation regimes are not susceptible or unilateral suspension or termination. If international agreements can be disregarded wherever they become politically inconvenient, confidence in the international legal order is inevitably weakened. The sanctity of the treaties is one of the foundations upon which peaceful relations among states are built. The implications extend well beyond South Asia. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, since April 2025, Pakistan has observed a pattern of actions that raises serious concern, including abrupt variations in the flows of Chenab and Jhelum rivers, and continued efforts to expand infrastructure capable of regulating waters allocated to Pakistan under the treaty. Such actions undermine the cooperative framework that has preserved regional stability for almost more than 6 decades. The recent supplementary award of the Court of Arbitration reaffirmed that the treaty imposes substantive legal limits on India's control over the western borders. This reinforces an essential principle. Disputes must be addressed through the mechanisms established by the treaty itself and not through unilateral actions and measures. Ladies and gentlemen, India's presence in the region has been witnessed by the world after the war, and this is most regrettable attitude as some of the speakers I heard since morning, and particularly what Hina Rubani Khar Sahiba wound up the second session. India's present course of conduct runs contrary to the fundamental rules governing treaty relations, including the Vienna Convention, as well as universally adopted principles of international law. Responsible nations respect international law and implement international treaties as a moral and legal obligation. We are convinced that bringing international commitments cannot be arbitrarily, conveniently, or unilaterally disregarded, manipulated, or terminated. This remains the core of international law and norms. Incidentally, Pakistan has 2 years elected member seat in the UN Security Council from 1st of January 2025 to 31st of December 2026. And countries in turn get its presidency. So did Pakistan last year in July. Which subject we chose for the material and for the ministerial discussion during our presidency, you will be happy to note. Multilateralism, peaceful settlement of disputes. This was Pakistan's subject. And it was dozens of countries took part. I personally went to preside that session, July 2025. So that shows Pakistan's intent, Pakistan's respect, and Pakistan's intentions about the respect for the international law and the treaties. Responsible nations respect international law and implement international treaties, as I said, as a moral and legal obligation. We are convinced that binding international commitments cannot be changed. We must be aware of the cost of derailing